What's going on at Luminato? That's what arts lovers and industry insiders have been asking in the wake of Josephine Ridge's sudden resignation, only 2 years into her tenure as the Toronto Festival's artistic director. Reached by phone in England, where she took a few days off to draw a breath, after resigning last week, Ridge says it was concerns over the festival's business model that led to her decision. Josephine Ridge, photographed in May 2017 at Artscape Young Place, says Luminato's strained budget doesn't provide the sort of resources for the vision which I brought in. Andrew Francis Wallace, Toronto star, the model that is in place for the foreseeable future, says Ridge, doesn't provide the sort of resources for the vision which I brought in, and which was accepted when I was appointed. I think that from the festival's perspective as well as my own, it would be best if they have an artistic director who can enthusiastically embrace the current realities and drive that forward. Those current realities are a far cry from the $15 million startup fund that Luminato famously earned from the province of Ontario upon its 2007 founding. That initial fund has now been spent, and a lucrative title sponsorship from L'Oreal ended in 2016. The festival's overall operating budget of $11 million in 2016, the year that featured outgoing artistic director Jorn Weisbrot's showy swan song at the Hearn generating station, dropped to $6.2 million in 2017 and $6 million this year. The festival recently switched from gross to net reporting of budget figures, meaning that amounts from 2017 onwards are slightly lower than they would have been in the previous system. Article continued below. Last year's budget for artistic programming was $2.7 million, down from $7.4 million in 2016, and this year the festival spent $2.5 million on its artistic program, a figure that takes account of a reduction of $220,000 made in March of this year. Ridge says that this adjustment caused particular complications, coming so close to the festival, in that programming had to be scaled back, which is damaging for artists and endangers ongoing creative relationships. The resources that the festival has to work with just don't provide the sort of platform and scope that you need to really continue, says Ridge. Read more. Luminato artistic director Josephine Ridge departing after 2 seasons. Pussy Riot's Maria Alyokina takes the Toronto stage in the urgent burning Dorseymal Clooney talks world issues and first ever Toronto visit. Ridge believes that one plank of her approach, committing to local work and building relationships in the Toronto arts community, is fully endorsed by the board and the festival, and that those values will be at the front of their consideration going forward. But the local is only part of what Luminato stands for. Part of that for me is also about the international context in which Toronto artists' work is seen, the work that is brought in from other parts of the country and the world that can resonate with local artists and audiences. Article continued. Also, the support for international programming isn't there. We get back to resourcing and the financial business model looking forward. I'm not saying that Luminato will never operate on all those levels in all those ways. I had to make a decision about the foreseeable future, says Ridge. The organizational structure of Luminato is somewhat unusual in that the artistic director reports to the CEO, currently Anthony Sargent. At most festivals and major arts organizations, artistic and executive leaders are peers who report to a board of directors. Fundraising is the purview of the CEO, board and the development department, with the artistic director expected to support fundraising initiatives with explanations of their artistic strategy and programming, a Luminato representative says. Rupert Duchesne, who has been a member of the Luminato board of directors since its inception, says that the board is very saddened by Ridge's resignation and that he was personally surprised. This year was one of the best festivals we've ever put on. It got critical acclaim, and acclaim from the artistic community, and it did well at the box office. Indeed, last month's edition made its mark, despite the budget constraints, with a program including some highly political theatre, an amateur dance spectacle, an evening with Amal Clooney and a pair of high-energy Irish productions. Luminato confirms that the festival made more than $1 million in ticket sales this year. When I put Ridge's concerns to him about the business model and lack of resources, Duchesne replied that there is always a tension between the practical budget and the artistic vision. During the course of this year we had to shape one to match the other, but we still put on a far bigger and longer festival than we've ever put on before. The first festivals lasted 9 days and the 2016 iteration was 16 days long. This year's spanned 18 days. News of her departure has been met with widespread surprise and sadness in the arts community. Josephine's the greatest thing that's happened to the festival in a really long time, says Aislinn Rose, creative producer of the Theatre Center and 3-time contract producer at Luminato. For the first time, we've had an artistic director in that position really asking what role the festival should and could be playing in the ecology of Toronto and Canadian art making. Filmmaker Adam Egoyan says that the news is all very shocking, calling Ridge incredibly involved, hands-on and committed to her work. What she was doing, reaching the roots of our scene here in Toronto, was remarkable, bringing a whole new complexion to the festival. Luminato contributed to commissioning Egoyan's new opera project You Are Mine Own, and Ridge says it will be part of the 2019 festival, in partnership with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. Indigenous programming, engagement and employment have been a central plank of Ridge's contribution. This woman has taken huge risks, and is so visionary and so respectful, says Anishinaabe arts leader Denise Bolduc, whom Ridge brought on to produce Tributaries, a tribute to the resilience of Indigenous women, in the 2017 festival, and retained this year to oversee Illuminating Works, a program bringing national and international arts presenters to the festival. Bolduc, like others I spoke to, points to Ridge's non-stop work ethic. During the festival, she was up at 5 a.m. and would work well past midnight. She would see shows and support them in rehearsal, and if she had to she would pick up a broom and sweep. Ridge says the decision to resign was very difficult, and points to the extraordinary group of people who work for Luminato as one of the key reasons why it's hard to leave. The other is the relationships she's forged with Toronto-based and Canadian artists. I had great difficulty thinking about the decision in front of me without that emotional color. Ridge will work out a resignation period in her contract, and beyond that has yet to sort out her next moves. I still have a lot of ideas and energy to give. I am looking for a rewarding home for those ideas and those energies. While she would love to stay in Canada, it needs to be the right opportunity and the right timing. An Australian, she requires a working visa to remain here. The festival is looking for a new artistic director to deliver the 2019 festival, much of which Ridge has programmed, and to work on into the future. Given Ridge's departure and the questions she raises, will Luminato struggle to find her replacement? I think there will be lots of people who will line up for an artistic director job, says Chris Nelson, the Canada-born artistic director and joint CEO of the London, UK, International Festival of Theatre, but they'll be facing the same problems as Josephine, who is a senior, pragmatic, top-shelf professional who has tried out all the options. Like many I spoke to, Nelson wonders if the right decision has been made. If I was on that board of directors, I'd look at the long game and do anything I could do to keep her at the organization. Karen Fricker is a Toronto-based theatre critic and a freelance contributor for The Star. Follow her on Twitter, @KarenFricker2.